As I made my way through the well-known streets to my parents' house, my heart raced. Long shadows were produced by the lowering light, reflecting my mounting anxiety. The tone of my mother's voice on the phone had been solemn, with a hint of urgency that made me tense. She had remarked, "We need to discuss something important," and my instinct told me it had to do with my older sister Rose, who had got divorced. Rose. I could taste the bitterness in the name alone. Our relationship had always been tense, with me always on the losing end of a never-ending power struggle. As I grew up, I was the rebellious one, the black sheep, and she was the golden child, the ideal daughter. Her accomplishments eclipsed my every success and amplified every mistake I made. As I pulled into the driveway, the memories came flooding back. Rose and her group of friends excluding me from their plans, the sarcastic comments, the tales that were circulating like wildfire through our school's hallways. Always unaware, my parents casually downplay my hurt by saying, "That's just how sisters are." However, this was no longer about quarrels from childhood. My wedding and the life I was creating with Joshua, the man who had finally shown me what it was to be loved and cherished, were the subjects of this discussion. A few months prior, Joshua, with his sweet smile and loving eyes, had proposed, and I had never experienced such joy. I had foolishly hoped that this news would reduce the distance between my parents and myself, despite the fact that we had a distant relationship. How foolish I was. My mother dropped the bombshell without any delay. She said, "We were hoping you'd postpone your wedding," in a deliberately bland tone. I repeated, my voice rising in shock. "Postpone? For how long?" she said. 2 years, as though that were the most sensible thing in the world. 2 years. My head whirled. My sister, who was still in shock over her divorce, couldn't bear the thought of me getting married. So 2 years of my life were put on pause. I asked, laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. "Are you serious?" But as I noticed the steely glitter in my mother's eyes, the laughter died in my throat. She took it quite seriously. She clarified, "Rose is heartbroken," in an empathetic tone. "She needs time to move on, to find someone new. Your wedding would just be too much for her right now." I became enraged. "How is my wedding interfering with her love life?" I asked. "This is my happiness, my future. Why should I put it on hold because of her bad decisions?" "We're a family, we need to support each other," was a well-worn phrase that was ignored. I had heard it innumerable times before, always at my expense, always in support of Rose. Our family had an unwritten rule. Rose's needs came first. I spit out, "This is ridiculous," and got up from my seat. "I can't believe you even asked me this." The sound of their justifications and guilt trips followed me out the door as I departed. The following day, the incessant and oppressive calls began. My mother's tearful voice begged me to change my mind, describing a family ripped apart by my self-centeredness. My dad, who typically watches family disputes from a distance, joined the chorus with a disappointed tone. His tone suggested that my wedding would be the last straw that would throw Rose over the brink. "Rose is very emotional right now," he remarked, "but I wasn't going to give up. I made the decision to live this life. I refused to let my destiny be dictated by their twisted sense of duty. I finally made the decision to speak with Rose face to face after days of intense inner struggle. With a voice tense with repressed rage, I questioned, "Was this your idea? Or are Mom and Dad just overreacting?" She said, "I do think it would be better if you postponed," in a firm yet modest manner. What was she thinking? At my wedding, she didn't want to deal with the pity looks and invasive questioning from family members. Reminding her of her failed marriage was not something she was prepared for. I lost patience. I said, "This is my wedding, Rose. No one is going to be pestering you about your divorce. It's about me and Joshua." She refused to be swayed, however, and said that I was being callous and unconcerned about her sentiments. I said, "The wedding is happening," in a bland voice. "Whether you or Mom and Dad show up or not, I'm not changing my plans." My hands trembled with rage as I hung up. I reiterated my position over the phone to my folks. "If you want to be there, great. If not, I understand. But the wedding is happening." I was unmoved by my mother's cliched sobs and charges of destroying the family. I had already decided. 3 weeks later, I approached Joshua as I headed down the aisle. It was hardly the idyllic moment I had dreamed of as a kid. My father's side of the aisle was conspicuously empty, so he wasn't there to reveal me. But a flood of calm came over me as I looked into Joshua's eyes, which were full of love and unshakable support. This was about the life we were creating together, about us. The reception was a mixed bag of emotions. Unaware of the drama, my extended family kept asking me why my parents weren't there. I avoided the questions at first, but the curiosity was unrelenting. At last, I told a few aunts and cousins about my parents' ridiculous demand and the boycott that followed. They reacted with a mixture of wrath and shock. Some said they supported my choice, while others were horrified by my parents' actions. Having my voice heard and being able to finally tell my side of the story felt freeing. The news spread like wildfire as the night went on. I was surprised to discover that I was surrounded by support rather than criticism. Friends and family I hadn't seen in years contacted me to say they understood and were impressed by my bravery. Then the unimaginable occurred. My parents were not invited to a cousin's wedding, which was scheduled for the following month. She didn't want her wonderful day to be overshadowed by their drama and hostility. Knowing that my choice had had such a profound impact on the family was an odd feeling. However, it also felt affirming. I had been the problem child and the scapegoat for years. The truth was now at last being seen by the public. Joshua and I had a much-needed getaway on our honeymoon. A week was spent on a remote beach, apart from my family's turmoil and poisonous atmosphere. I hardly used my phone, preferring to enjoy the tranquility and the happiness that came with being Mrs. Joshua Miller. But as soon as we got back, reality hit us hard. My parents' voicemails were rife with hate speech and profanity. They accused me of being entitled, self-centered, and a family traitor. In response, Rose accused me of favoring my husband over them. Even when I blocked their numbers, they kept trying to reach me, and it was tiring. I was the unwilling player in what felt like a perverse game. Joshua was a continual support system, providing advice and empathy. I felt conflicted, though. Even though these were my parents, I still harbored the hope that they would change their ways, express regret, and at last admit the hurt they had caused. However, I realized in my heart that it was a hopeless endeavor. They were too enmeshed in their own story and too enamored of Rose to ever see my point of view. I was at a turning point. Do I have to break off all contact with them? Or was there a chance to keep a relationship somewhat intact? I need your advice, Reddit. How do I handle relatives that don't respect my personal space? Is the only option to avoid contact? My return from the honeymoon was followed by a haze of frustration, rage, and an odd feeling of alienation. I felt a sense of fear every time my phone rang with a notification. They seemed intent on punishing me for defying them by drawing me back into their negative whirlpool. Their strategies intensified. They turned to emails, Facebook messages, and even direct messages on Instagram once I blocked their numbers. It was an unrelenting assault of allegations, guilt trips, and flimsy threats. My mother's texts, which were full of declarations about my eventual regret and family abandonment, were especially painful. My dad's were more subdued and filled with a profound disappointment that was like a kick to the stomach. Then there was Rose. She had been silent during the wedding preparation process, but suddenly she came out of the shadows with bitter messages. She accused me of damaging our relationship irreparably by putting Joshua before family. Her personal part in the drama was conveniently forgotten in a classic case of rewriting history. It seemed like I was speaking to a brick wall when I attempted to reason with them and explain how their actions were impacting me. They responded with a combination of continued attacks, deflection, and denial. They obviously didn't want to know my point of view. They just wanted to take back control and make me play the subservient part I had always performed. The ongoing strain began to wear thin. I saw that I was becoming withdrawn from friends, having trouble concentrating at work, and losing my temper with Joshua over trivial irritations. The ominous cloud looming over me was overshadowing the happiness of being newlywed. Joshua touched my hand tenderly one evening when I was sitting on the couch going through another guilt-ridden email from my mother. "Lexi," he added quietly, his voice full of worry, You need to set some boundaries because you can't keep doing this to yourself." His remarks were a lifesaver. I knew that he was correct. I couldn't continue to let my family to control my feelings and general well-being. It was time to regain command. However, how? Cutting off communication seemed so severe and definitive. A part of me still longed for their love and approval in spite of everything. These were my parents and my sister. I agonized over my alternatives for the next few days, analyzing their advantages and disadvantages. In my quest for solutions and a road plan to go through this maze, I read a ton of articles and Reddit discussions regarding toxic families. The significance of self-preservation surfaced as a recurrent subject. I came to the realization that I couldn't continue to put my happiness at risk in order to appease a family that didn't care about me. It was time to put myself first in order to safeguard my emotional and mental well-being. I decided to avoid interaction with a heavy heart. I wrote a final email to Rose and my parents, telling them that I needed time to recover and that their actions were unacceptable. I didn't express regret for my decisions or desire for a better future. It was a fresh start, the final chapter of a painful and disappointing journey. One of the most difficult things I've ever done was press the send button. An unanticipated feeling of relief followed a wave of nausea. It was finished. At last, I had made a mark in the sand. The ensuing hush was deafening. No more accusatory letters, guilt-tripping emails, or irate voicemails. At first it was eerie, like the quiet before a storm. However, the silence became a salve for my spirit as the days stretched into weeks. I began to reconstruct my life without the continual burden of their demands and rediscover who I was. I pushed myself into my career, made new friends, and, above all, concentrated on deepening my relationship with Joshua. He provided me with constant support and understanding during the entire struggle, making him my rock. We discussed everything, dealt with the hurt, and rejoiced in our newfound independence. Through the furnace of hardship, our relationship grew stronger. As we walked hand in hand around the park one lovely afternoon, I became aware that it had been days since I had given my family any thought. A sensation of calm that I had never experienced before had taken the place of the ongoing worry that had afflicted me for months. I realized then that I had made the proper choice. The goal of cutting off touch was to protect myself, not to punish them. It was about creating a life of love and respect, about choosing my own happiness. And that was more valuable than any familial links, I knew. I experienced a peculiar spectrum of feelings in the weeks after I decided to stop communicating. I felt lighter and more liberated than I had in years. A sudden sensation of serenity had taken the place of the persistent knot of anxiety in my gut. At last, I had taken charge of my own life and was no longer bound by their demands and machinations. But during the calm hours, there were also hints of guilt and periods of uncertainty. Had I been too severe? Was there a future possibility of reconciliation? I was attempting to move on from the past, and these thoughts were like ghostly limbs. Joshua's steadfast support gave me comfort. He was my confidant, my safe haven, and the only person who genuinely understood the inner turmoil I was experiencing. We talked, told stories, and just enjoyed one another's company during the evenings. He simply listened to me with an open heart and gave me words of encouragement when I needed them most, without ever pressuring or passing judgment. A few weeks after sending that last email, I got a text message from an unidentified number one day. A beat skipped in my chest. Were they attempting to contact me using a new phone? I opened the message, fingers shaking. It came from my mom's sister, Aunt Sarah. "Lexi," it said, "I'm so sorry about everything that's happened. Your mom told me about the wedding. I just want you to know that I'm on your side. You deserve to be happy." My eyes filled with tears. It was the first open display of support from a family member. I'd always been close to Aunt Sarah, but I didn't know she knew how much turmoil there was. That day we spent hours conversing and exchanging grievances and anecdotes. She confirmed that I was right to stand up for myself, acknowledged the years of emotional abuse and favoritism, and validated my sentiments. It was a pivotal moment. I felt stronger knowing that I wasn't alone and that someone else saw the truth. Other family members contacted them with similar words of encouragement in the weeks that followed. My grandmother, uncles, and cousins all offered words of support and expressed their shock at my parents' actions. It resembled a dam breaking. All of a sudden, the family that had always seemed so far away and unapproachable was opening out to me. They told me about my parents' partiality for Rose and the subtle insults and rejections they had seen over the years. It was enlightening and somehow reassuring. I became aware that my personal family was not the only group affected by the dysfunction. It was a generation-long trend, a heritage of controlling and manipulating emotions. However, I was ending that pattern. I was safeguarding my own health and creating a more positive dynamic among the wider family by deciding on myself and establishing boundaries. My folks were still being shunned. Their phones went ignored. They were no longer invited to family get-togethers, and their attempts to interact on social media were met with silence. It was a silent uprising, a group protest against their poisonous actions. Knowing that I had contributed to their seclusion made me occasionally feel guilty. However, I reminded myself that I had made my decision and they had made theirs. In order to please them, I couldn't compromise my happiness or take responsibility for theirs. A few months after the wedding, I got a surprise delivery in the mail one day. The little box had my mother's well-known handwriting on it. I opened it with a pounding heart. A photo album with images from my early years was inside. I have photos of myself as a baby, playing with my cousins, learning to walk, and celebrating birthdays. A handwritten remark on the final page said, simply, "We miss you." As I turned the pages, tears fell down my cheeks. It was an act of affection, a silent request for pardon. However, it also served as a reminder of the good times, the happy recollections that had been eclipsed by the years of suffering. I was unsure of how to react. I felt compelled to reach out, to close the distance, to provide a ray of hope. However, a part of me resisted because I was worried about falling back into the same destructive habits. Uncertain of what was ahead, I put the album away. However, one thing was for sure. I had discovered my own road to happiness, my voice, and my strength, and I was aware that no one could ever take that away from me. The picture album began to represent the range of complicated feelings that were churning inside of me. It served as a physical reminder of a history that I was unable to forget, a past that was both hurtful and loving. I noticed that I frequently took it out, following the contours of my younger self, looking for hints of the present in the faded pictures. I admitted my perplexity to Joshua one evening when we were sitting on the porch swing, the album open on my lap. I said, "I don't know what to do," in an emotionally charged voice. A part of me wants to forgive them, to move forward, but I'm so scared of getting hurt again. Ever the patient listener, Joshua gave my hand a light squeeze. "It's okay to feel conflicted," he added quietly. "This isn't easy, but whatever you decide, I'm here for you." My spirit felt soothed by his words. I was aware that I wasn't traveling alone. We discussed the potential consequences and weighed the advantages and disadvantages late into the night. There were no assurances or simple solutions. I ultimately made the decision to trust my gut. I wrote my parents a brief letter acknowledging their effort to get in touch and thanking them for the photo album. I didn't promise reconciliation or bring up forgiveness. It was a careful opening of the door, a tentative step. The stillness dragged on for weeks, then months. I struggled with uncertainty, questioning whether I had made the correct choice. Had their gesture been misinterpreted? Was it only another ploy to manipulate them, or were they genuinely sorry? I was about to give up until I got a letter in the mail. My mother gave it to me. She spoke tentatively, with regrets and apologies. She admitted their errors, their years of partiality, and the unjust load they had put on me. She talked about wanting to re-establish our friendship and about missing me. Rose was not brought up, and their previous behavior was not attempted to be justified. The typical barriers and tactics were removed, leaving the letter honest and unvarnished. Every word etched itself into my heart as I read it innumerable times. Although it wasn't a full apology, it was a beginning. It was a recognition of my right to happiness and the hurt they had caused. I made the decision to try them again. We began with brief phone calls, cautious discussions, and lengthy pauses interspersed with apprehensive laughs. At first it was uncomfortable, like strangers negotiating a minefield of prior traumas. But the walls started to come down, gently, slowly. We discussed the wedding as well as the long-simmering hurt and rage. Tears were shed, apologies were offered, and a tentative vision of a future dominated by understanding and respect was explored. It wasn't simple. When old patterns began to reappear, there were setbacks and frustrated times. However, we persisted because we had a same goal of mending the scars from the past. Rose stayed out of sight. Although she sent a quick apology, no genuine attempt was made to mend our friendship. It served as a reminder that some ties are irreparable and that some wounds go too deep. However, I had accepted that. I now had a family of my own, one based on respect, love, and support for one another. Together, Joshua and I were building a house that was warm, full of laughter, and had the peaceful sense of belonging. I also realized that while the past would always be a part of me, it no longer defined me as I turned to the future. I was stronger and more resilient than ever after rising from the ashes. Setting limits, putting my own health first, and embracing the love that really mattered were all lessons I had learned. Despite the lengthy and difficult road, I had finally arrived at a place of tranquility where I could declare, I am free. Life appears to have a habit of surprising you with unexpected turns. Another bombshell came just as I was negotiating the difficulties of a completely redesigned relationship with my parents and trying to achieve a tenuous peace with them. Rose was getting married. My cousin casually texted me the news, along with a screenshot of Rose's happy smile on social media with her engagement ring conspicuously visible. The irony was enough thick to pierce with a knife. Less than a year later, the sister who insisted that I postpone my wedding because she was too heartbroken was now missing her own wedding. I felt a surge of rage, which was soon followed by a feeling of amused disinterest. Their action was so predictable, it was almost laughable. Once again, Rose, the eternal victim, had manipulated the story to her advantage. This time, though, I resisted getting sucked into the turmoil. I didn't even bother to leave a comment on her social media post. I didn't phone my parents, and I didn't ask for explanations. I just watched from a distance, a passive bystander to their meticulously planned joy. Their quiet was quite telling. There was no phone call to break the good news, no invitation, and not even a brief text message. I appeared as a ghost in their family portrait, as though I had been removed from their lives. And what do you know? It was freeing. I didn't know I needed the sense of closure that came with their last exclusion. It served as a reminder that I had made the proper choice, and that my happiness was not dependent on their acceptance. I concentrated on taking care of my personal needs and fostering my relationship with Joshua. In contrast to the drama that had surrounded my sister's frenzied engagement, we celebrated our anniversary with a calm meal. We purchased a home, a comfortable little nest where we could establish our own customs and make our own memories. We filled it with the soothing regularity of daily life, the aroma of freshly baked cookies, and laughing. My parents continued to be a distant presence, connecting with me via carefully crafted emails and sporadic phone conversations. They interacted with a careful tenderness, a persistent concern of breaking the tenuous ceasefire we had established. For my own sake, not theirs, I learnt to forgive. The goal of forgiveness was to let go of the resentment that had been weighing me down for so long, not to approve of their previous behavior, and the wounds started to mend as the years went by. Though they served as a reminder of the struggles I had faced and the lessons I had learned, the scars no longer defined who I was. I created a loving, authentic life with people who loved me for who I was, not because of my part in their family's drama. I found the resilience and inner strength that had been formed in the furnace of hardship. I was filled with a deep sense of thankfulness. One cool autumn afternoon, as I sat on my porch swing and watched the leaves sway in the wind, I had survived the storm, come out of the darkness, and discovered my own way to happiness. There had been tears, rage, and times of extreme despair throughout the long and difficult road. However, it had also been a path of self-discovery, voice, and asserting my right to live a life free from control and manipulation. As I looked to the future, I was confident that I would meet any obstacles head-on with bravery, poise, and the unyielding conviction that I was deserving of love, happiness, and a life that I could live how I wanted. That's my narrative then. A tale of heartache and recovery, of liberation and self-discovery. This story serves as a reminder that family isn't always determined by blood, but rather by those who show us unconditional love and support. And I will always be thankful for that. Story 2. So picture this. I'm 39, married to my wife, Elena, she's 36, for the past 15 years. We've got a 13-year-old son, Alex. My family? It's a full house. There's Mom, 58, Dad, 62, my sister, Olivia, 30, and my youngest brother, Noah, 22. Last year, things took a turn for the unexpected. I found Elena crying in our bedroom. When I asked what was wrong, she dropped the bomb. She was pregnant. Now, any other time, I would have been over the moon. But something felt off. Elena seemed more distressed than happy, and she just walked out of the room. It was weird, to say the least. Around the same time, I noticed she was glued to her phone. With the whole COVID thing going on, it was me doing everything, taking care of her, all the housework, the whole 9 yards. We couldn't risk having anyone else come over. Eventually, our baby girl, Lily, arrived. She's a mini Elena, absolutely adorable. Fast forward to a few months later, and Noah starts practically living at our place. At first, I didn't think much of it. He's my brother, right? But then we all went to stay with my parents for a couple of weeks, and that's when the alarm bells started ringing. Elena and Noah were close, like way too close for comfort. I'm a busy guy. I'm an investment banker. I manage some of my dad's businesses, and we have a bunch of rental properties. So, yeah, I'm not always around. But when I was home, it was impossible to ignore the weird vibe between them. It was especially strange because Elena has always been closer to Olivia than anyone else. Adding to the weirdness, Olivia started hovering around me, like she was trying to tell me something but couldn't quite spit it out. Every time I asked if something was up, she'd just brush it off and say everything was cool. Then, my dad suggests a fishing trip, just him and me. I figured, why not? So we're out there, casting lines, and he starts reminiscing about fishing with his own dad at that same spot. It was nice, a real bonding moment. He even started praising me, telling me what a great son I am and how proud he is. But I could sense there was something more he wanted to say. Finally, he gets to the part where he's disappointed in Noah. Turns out, Noah's life isn't exactly on track. No job, smokes a lot, drinks even more. My dad was never that close to him, but Mom always had a soft spot for the guy. As we're packing up, Dad suddenly says he has to leave. He hands me the fishing gear and a small piece of paper, telling me to read it after he's gone. I unfold the paper, and my world implodes. It's a DNA test result, and it hits me like a ton of bricks. I'm not Lily's father. My blood ran cold. I couldn't just sit there with this bombshell exploding in my head. I raced back to my parents' house, where everyone was gathered. It felt like walking into a war zone. I confronted Elena and Noah, and they both crumbled. Confessed everything. Claimed it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. Turns out, their mistake had been going on for over a year. They'd fallen for each other. Elena tried to soften the blow, saying she regretted it, that she'd always be sorry. She kept repeating how I was the perfect husband, the perfect dad. But none of that made the pain any less sharp. Here's the thing, I'm a workaholic. My job keeps me on the move, and I'm not home as much as I'd like to be, but I wasn't completely absent. We had those amazing family vacations twice a year, date nights once or twice a month, and our intimate life was active. I always checked in with Elena, asking if she was okay, hoping she'd open up if something was bothering her. And then there was Olivia. She knew something was off but couldn't bring herself to tell me. That felt like a punch to the gut. But it gets worse. My mom, bless her heart, decided to wade into this mess, trying to lecture me about acceptance. She was all about moving on, being one big happy family, because Lily had gotten attached to, well, to my brother's child. She pushed for forgiveness, saying I was the older brother. I had to set an example. My jaw hit the floor, my own family playing me for a fool. I let them have it. Told Elena I wasn't going to play these games, compete for her attention. Divorce was on the table. And Noah, the guy I'd always had his back. He was the one who stabbed me in the heart. I walked out, leaving them to deal with the wreckage they'd created. My phone blew up. Dad called, trying to be supportive, but he was caught between me and Mom. He confessed he felt like a terrible father and dropped another bomb. Mom knew about the affair all along. She'd kept it a secret. I told him to forget it. If this was how it was going to be, maybe it was better if I cut ties with the whole lot. After the initial shock, I started the divorce process. Elena wouldn't leave me alone. Non-stop calls, endless texts. Through it all, I ached for Alex. He missed me terribly. My world had been turned upside down, and I was just trying to find my footing. Noah, the coward, hadn't even reached out. But Olivia? She apologized. She said, "I know I should have been there for you, but I couldn't find the courage. You've always been the superhero in my eyes, and I'm so proud to call you my brother." Her words meant a lot, but I didn't have the energy to reply to her or anyone else. Then Mom called. She rambled on about how everyone makes mistakes, how we could all be a happy family again if I just forgave and forgot. And then she said something that made my blood boil. "Your kids need a dad, and if you can't be that dad, Noah will be." As if that was supposed to make everything better. She even threatened me, saying if she sided against me in court, I could kiss my chances of keeping my kids goodbye. I blocked her number faster than you can say betrayal. I haven't spoken to any of them since. The divorce is going to cost a fortune, but I don't care. I've kept this whole mess a secret from everyone else, and it's been eating me alive. I can't sleep or eat. I feel like I've lost everything that mattered. My family, my partner, my kids, even my pride. This past week has been a nightmare I can't wake up from. I keep asking myself, what's the point of it all? The lawyer laid it all out. I had to start the divorce proceedings ASAP. He mentioned spousal support, money I'd have to pay Elena for her and Lily. Even though Lily wasn't biologically mine, I still loved her like crazy. But getting custody of her was going to be an uphill battle, considering the whole paternity situation. This divorce wasn't going to be quick or cheap. I was looking at about $900 a month in support payments, potentially shared custody of Alex, and splitting our assets down the middle. Oh, and about that DNA test? It was a paternity test for Lily and Noah. The results? 99% chance Noah was the father. Can you believe that? He was only 17 when Elena and I first got together. Talk about a messed up situation. I kept hoping things would start to look up, but the universe had other plans. It was like it decided to throw more fuel on the fire. After I found out about everything, I moved out, got my finances in order, talked to some lawyers, and started the divorce process. Then, last Friday, the divorce papers arrived. And out of the blue, Elena shows up at my doorstep. We had this long, intense conversation. She played the think of our son card and apologized for the mess she'd created. But my mind was made up. I was done. I handed her the divorce papers, and get this. She tried to seduce me, as if that would make me forget everything and call the whole thing off. Seriously? I told her to leave. But wait, there's more. Olivia, who usually lives in the Netherlands, came back for what was supposed to be a relaxing vacation. That plan went out the window thanks to this whole circus. She let Elena and Mom have it, then cut her trip short and went back home. We had a long talk on the phone after she left. She was torn up about being stuck in the middle of this mess. Turns out, Mom had begged Olivia not to tell me anything, worried sick about how I'd react. And apparently, Noah was a big part of the reason Mom kept quiet. Talking to Olivia helped me understand things a bit better, but it didn't make me feel any less betrayed. I've seen some comments online, people saying my story sounds too crazy to be true. Honestly, I wish it was all a bad dream, but it's real, and it feels like my world is crumbling around me. Everything I care about is slipping through my fingers. On the bright side, I did manage to spend some quality time with Alex recently. We went to this new gaming place that's all the rage. It was a few hours of escape, just me and him, lost in virtual worlds. Then I had a talk with Noah. He told me Mom was having a really hard time, crying every day. And Elena? She was lost and confused and didn't know what to do next. He also admitted that a lot of this mess was because he wasn't pulling his weight. He was more interested in getting high and drunk than facing any real responsibility. Olivia and I have had enough. We're done with the family drama. We're even stepping away from any inheritance because who needs that headache? I'm seriously considering cutting ties completely, packing up, and starting over in a new country. Olivia has been amazing, even offering to help me get settled if I move to the Netherlands. The more I think about it, the more it feels like the right move. It's been a year since I started the divorce process. It's been brutal. The days are long, and every time I think about what happened, it takes my breath away. The stress has been so bad, I've been sick countless times. My health is deteriorating, blood pressure and sugar levels all over the place. Then, out of nowhere, I get a call from Dad. Mom had a stroke, a bad one. She collapsed during lunch and is now in the hospital, her condition grim. The doctors aren't optimistic. They told us to pray. In the middle of all this, Elena has been at the hospital playing the dutiful daughter-in-law. It's surreal watching her act like nothing happened. Our encounters are tense, both of us tiptoeing around the giant elephant in the room. Noah shows up at the hospital for a few hours here and there, then disappears again. My kids and my dad are trying to navigate this storm together. Dad is preparing for the worst, asking me to come visit. I talked to Olivia about it, and she's just as conflicted as I am. Part of me wants to see Mom, but another part of me hesitates. It's a complicated situation. Mom is still my mom, but she chose to turn her back on me. She sided with Elena, essentially telling me I was on my own if I made a fuss about the affair. Now she's in the hospital wanting to see me. I'm a wreck. My mind goes to dark places, even thinking about ending it all. I've tried talking to therapists, hoping for some guidance, but they just seem to nod and take my money. To add to the drama, my relatives have been visiting Mom, and as word of Elena's infidelity spreads, it's like watching dominoes fall. My favorite uncle, who I always thought was level-headed, completely lost it. He unleashed a verbal storm on Elena and Noah right there in the hospital. It got so bad that Alex had to step in and play peacemaker, which actually worked. My friends have been trying to offer support. They all say the same thing. Finalize the divorce, pack up my life, maybe hit the reset button in a new country, start over, find someone new, and try to rebuild some semblance of happiness. It's a lot to process. I met with my lawyer to discuss my options. He explained that if Mom didn't have a will, I could still get my share of the inheritance. But that's only if I don't give up my claim, or if she doesn't cut me out completely. At this point, the inheritance, the money, staying connected to my family, it doesn't matter anymore. All I care about is Alex. I just want to grab him and run away from this nightmare. Find a place where we can breathe and feel safe. The fight for custody and securing Alex's future is shaping up to be even more complicated than the divorce. Apparently, the affair doesn't hold much weight legally in many places. And since Elena has been the stay-at-home parent, it puts me at a disadvantage. But there might be a strategy. If I give up my claim to the inheritance, it could improve my chances of getting custody and maybe even avoid paying spousal support. It's a long shot, and it depends on finding some common ground with Elena. I also have the option of filing a complaint against Noah for ruining my marriage, and with Alex still being a minor, I could potentially get a restraining order against both Elena and Noah, especially since the drug and alcohol use wouldn't look good in court. So there's a glimmer of hope, but Mom's health crisis has thrown me for a loop. It's amazing how a few weeks can turn your world upside down. The only thing keeping me going is Alex. He's my reason to keep fighting. Mom's condition was worse than anyone expected. Despite everything, I couldn't turn my back on her. I went to the hospital and seeing her so fragile, hooked up to machines, it was a punch in the gut. It reminded me that beneath all the hurt and betrayal, there's still a family connection. Then Noah finally reached out. He apologized for the chaos he'd caused and admitted he felt lost without my guidance. Part of me wanted to write him off, but another part, the part that remembered the good times before everything went wrong, couldn't completely shut him out. Olivia has been my rock. She's been handling everything, our parents, the logistics, and making sure I don't lose my mind. She's even talking about family therapy, hoping we can at least be in the same room without it turning into World War III. The legal battle is ongoing. My lawyer and I have been strategizing non-stop. Divorce, custody, inheritance. We're fighting on all fronts. There might be a loophole that could help me win custody, given the circumstances with Noah and Elena. It's a long shot, but I'll take any advantage I can get. Alex has been taking everything like a champ, but it's clearly affecting him. He's been acting out at school, getting into fights, and his grades have dropped. So on top of everything else, I'm trying to be super dad, helping him navigate this storm. Elena has been sending mixed signals. One minute she's begging for another chance. The next she's acting like we're enemies. It's exhausting. But for the sake of our kids, I'm trying to maintain some level of civility. My focus is on creating a stable environment for Alex, making sure he knows he's not alone. The divorce is moving forward, and while it's going to be rough, I'm ready for it. As for my family, it's a minefield. There's a lot of hurt and betrayal, but also a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we can salvage something from this wreckage. It won't be easy, but I'm starting to think there might be light at the end of this tunnel. I'm trying to focus on the positive, the small victories, the lessons learned. This whole ordeal has reminded me of what truly matters, and it's brought me closer to some family members while making me realize who I can really count on. It's been a journey filled with twists and turns, but I'm learning, growing and surviving. Here's hoping the next chapter is a little less dramatic. But knowing my luck, I'll probably have enough material for a best-selling novel by the time this is all over.